Dakota Evans stood on the threshold of their new home in the suburbs of Seattle. The warm autumn wind played with her long brown hair as she looked at her new house. It was bigger and more comfortable than all the previous places she had lived before. Her mother had finally gotten a promotion at work, which meant they could afford to move to a better area. But Dakota was anxious. New school, new people. She didn't like change. Since childhood, Dakota had suffered from social phobia, and every move was another test for her. At her previous school, she had hardly communicated with her classmates, preferring to hide behind the screen of her laptop. She went up to her room, which she had chosen back when she was looking at the house. The spacious room with large windows letting in a lot of light had already begun to fill up with her personal belongings. A laptop on the table, several favorite books on the shelf, and her main attribute, gaming headphones, lying nearby. "How are you?" her mother asked, peeking through the door. "Fine," Dakota replied, trying to smile. Her mother looked at her with a little concern. She was always worried about her daughter, but she knew there was no point in pressuring her. "Okay. I'll leave you to unpack. But don't forget, tomorrow is the first day of school." As the door closed, Dakota took a deep breath. First day, she thought. Her stomach clenched at the thought of being surrounded by unfamiliar faces. Instead of continuing to unpack, she turned on her laptop. The entrance to her second world, a world where she was strong and confident. Dakota entered her team, and the screen came alive with bright colors and dynamic sounds. She immediately heard the familiar voices of her teammates. "Finally, Mars. Where have you been?" came the voice of one of the players, Owen. "Moving," she answered briefly, her voice confident and calm. "Are you ready for the tournament?" asked Tony, the newest member of the team. "Always ready," she snapped. The game began. Dakota was instantly strategizing, planning her team's moves, and coordinating their actions. Here, she was someone else. Here, she was respected and listened to. "Good move, Mars," Tony praised her. "You always find a way to win." The words of encouragement brought a small smile to her face. If only it were that simple in real life. Dakota woke up the next morning with a heavy heart. She spent half an hour choosing an outfit that would be neutral enough not to attract unnecessary attention. In the end, she settled on dark jeans and a soft sweater. As she entered the school, a feeling of awkwardness immediately overcame her. The school hallway was filled with noisy groups of students. Laughter, conversations, ringing phones, all of it reminded her how much of an outsider she was. She picked up her schedule from the office and headed to her first period. Her attempts to remain unnoticed seemed to be working until someone called out to her. "You're new, huh?" she heard a female voice. She turned around to see a bright blonde with a wide smile. "Yes," Dakota answered quietly. "I'm Lily." "Let me show you around," the girl offered. Dakota nodded sheepishly, surprised by the unexpected kindness. Lily stayed close to her throughout the day. She introduced her to several of her friends, but Dakota still felt out of place. However, something about Lily was so friendly and sincere that for the first time in a long time, Dakota felt like maybe things weren't so bad. As the day drew to a close, Lily suggested, "Listen, I'm having a party on Friday. Come." I'm not sure," Dakota tried to evade. "Don't even think about saying no." "I'll pick you up," Lily insisted. Dakota couldn't think of a reason to say no. Maybe this is my chance for something new, she thought as she walked home. She didn't know that this evening would change her life. Dakota glanced nervously in the mirror. Lily was due any minute to pick her up for the party. She tried to convince herself again that this was a good idea. "It's just an evening," she thought, fixing her hair. "If it's bad, I can just leave." She chose a simple navy dress and white sneakers, deciding that too bright an outfit would attract unwanted attention. When the horn blared outside her house, she took a deep breath, grabbed her purse, and stepped out. "You look amazing," Lily exclaimed as she opened the passenger door of her Jeep. Thank you, Dakota replied quietly, feeling her cheeks grow pink. Along the way, Lily passed some of the guests who were at the party, and Dakota learned that most of them were Lily's friends from school. My brother Thomas will be there, Lily added. He doesn't usually hang out with us, but I talked him into it tonight. Dakota smiled, although she didn't think it was necessary. She knew that at such events, it was best for her to keep a low profile. Lily's house was a workplace. The high ceilings, the large window that looked out over the city, and the sparkling Christmas tree in the study living room created a festive atmosphere. There were girls, sparkly decorations, and people everywhere. Come in, make yourself at home, Lily said, taking her hand and leading her into the room. Dakota noticed that some of the guests were looking at her. It made her slightly panic. She tried to focus on Lily, who had already introduced her to her usual friends. This is Mike and Jessica, they're from our school. And this is Thomas, my brother, Lily said, pushing Dakota toward the arrogant boy with dark hair and sparkling green eyes. Hi, he said, his deep voice sounding like it could calm any storm. Hi, Dakota replied, trying not to look him in the eye for too long. New girl, he asked, offering her his hand. She addressed him briefly and shook his hand. Her palm was small and cold in his free one. You look tense. Relax, it's just a party, he added with a small smile. I'm trying, she admitted, feeling her heart begin to beat a little faster. After a while, when the party was in full swing, Dakota finally found a quiet corner near the tree. She picked up a glass of juice and looked at the twinkling lights on the garland with interest. Hiding, a familiar voice rang out. She turned around and saw Thomas standing with a glass of beer. His shirt was casually unbuttoned at the collar, his eyes glowing with good nature. A little, she answered, feeling her face flush again. He sat down next to her on the couch. It can be noisy here. Sometimes I prefer to read in silence myself, he said, leaning his elbows against the back. Is this your parents' house? She asked, changing the subject. Yes, but they're on vacation right now. Lily did all this without their knowledge. I hope the neighbors won't call the police. Dakota giggled, and Thomas looked at her in surprise. You have a nice laugh, he said, leaning in a little closer. She looked away, not knowing how to react. Thank you, she whispered. Lily pays a lot of attention to you, he began. Really? She asked, surprised. Yeah, she said you were too smart, but shy. I guess she's right. Is that bad? She asked, looking him in the eye. No, not at all, he answered, and his voice was sincere. You're different. They stared at each other for a few seconds, until the noise of the party reminded them that they were not alone. When Thomas stood up, he leaned toward Dakota and said quietly, It was nice talking to you. I hope we'll see each other again. Her heart skipped a beat. She watched him walk away, and found herself thinking that for the first time in a long time, she wasn't so scared. The encounter made her wonder if this was the beginning of something new. After the party at Lily's house, Dakota's life seemed to take on new colors. Thomas continued to appear in her thoughts. His voice, his smile, and the sincere interest with which he spoke, as if he were going into her soul. However, she did not hope for anything more. Dakota tried to keep her distance, although Lily was inviting her out more and more often to go on walks or do activities together. One evening, after class, Lily suggested again. Let's go to my place. Thomas is home, we can have dinner together. I'm not sure this is a good idea, Dakota began, but Lily interrupted her. Stop it. You two get along well. Thomas likes that you can talk about real things with him. It's a chance to get to know him better. Dakota gave in. When they arrived, Thomas was indeed home. He was standing in the kitchen, cooking pasta, looking completely at ease. Oh, hi, he said, glancing briefly at Dakota before returning his attention to the pan. Hi, she replied quietly, feeling a little awkward. Lily quickly took control of the situation, starting to chat about the day's events, while Thomas continued to cook. However, Dakota noticed how he looked at her from time to time, as if he wanted to say something. After dinner, when Lily went into another room, Thomas was alone with Dakota in the living room. "You seem thoughtful," he began, sitting down opposite her. "I've been thinking a lot," she admitted honestly. "About what?" "About how weird it is that I'm here. Just a few weeks ago, I was sure that no one was interested in me, and now." "Now you're wrong," he interrupted. She looked up in surprise. "You're interesting, Dakota. You're different." "Why do you think that?" she asked, feeling her voice tremble. Thomas thought for a moment before answering. "You're not trying to be someone else. You're real. People are rarely like that these days." The words touched her deeply. A few days later, Thomas himself contacted her. He called to invite her to spend the weekend in the countryside. "My friends and I have a little tradition. Before Christmas, we go skiing." "You've never tried it, have you?" "Never," she admitted honestly. "Then this is a great opportunity to learn. We'll be there if something goes wrong," he said with a warm smile that she could feel even over the phone. Her heart wavered. On the one hand, she was afraid of being surrounded by new people, but on the other, she was drawn to Thomas. "Okay," she finally agreed. The trip out of town turned out to be a real adventure. The slopes were loud and fun, but Dakota stayed close to Thomas the whole time. He patiently taught her the basics of skiing, helped her up when she fell, and encouraged her when she lost her confidence. "You're doing better than I expected," he praised her when she managed to ski down a small slope on her own for the first time. "You're just a good teacher," she replied, smiling. "Maybe," he answered, leaning closer. "But you do it yourself, Dakota." She couldn't answer anything, because they were interrupted by Thomas's friends inviting everyone for hot chocolate. In the evening, sitting by the fireplace with a cup, Dakota felt Thomas cover her hand. She looked at him, and he lightly squeezed her palm, as if to say, "I'm here." This small, but such an important detail made her understand that something real was being born between them. Skiing was not only a new experience for Dakota, but also remained to get to know Thomas better. His sincerity, patience, and warmth opened up a world for her that she had never suspected before. However, she was still afraid to give free rein to her feelings. It was no coincidence that Thomas actually thought about her. The next day, Thomas suggested that they hold a skating rink near the house where their group was staying. "Can you skate?" he asked, handing her a pair of shiny skates. "I've never tried it," Dakota admitted with a small smile. "Great, then I have a reason to be your teacher again," he said with a good-natured laugh, and Dakota felt her heart beat faster. The rink was crowded, laughter and music filling the air. Thomas held Dakota's hand securely as she took her first tentative steps across the ice. "Don't look down," he said softly, leaning toward her face. "Just trust me." "I'm trying, but it's hard," she replied, struggling to keep her balance. "Sometimes hard things become easy if you stop thinking about falling," Thomas said quietly. His words seemed to touch something inside her. She looked up and saw his warm, reassuring smile. "Well done," he said when she managed to skate a few meters without his support. But suddenly her legs gave way, and she fell, dragging Thomas with her. They found themselves on the ice, laughing like children. "At least now we both know what it's like to fall," Dakota joked, getting to her feet with his help. "But we got up, and that's the main thing," he answered, looking straight into her eyes. After skating, they returned to the cottage. Dinner was already over, and their friends had gone to their rooms, leaving Dakota and Thomas alone in the living room by the fireplace. "You're doing well today," Thomas said, handing her a cup of hot tea. "You're too generous in your assessments," she replied, but her smile betrayed her joy. "Dakota," he began, his voice becoming more serious. "It seems to me that you're used to underestimating yourself." She looked down, avoiding his eyes. "It's not," she said quietly. "Then why are you always embarrassed when people compliment you? Why do you think you have to prove anything?" His questions caught her off guard. She didn't know how to respond. You don't have to tell me now, he said softly. But if something is bothering you, I want you to know that I'm here for you. His words, so simple and sincere, stirred real emotions in her soul. Thank you, Thomas, she whispered, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. He reached out and gently touched her hands. Their eyes met, and Dakota felt that she could no longer ignore their feelings. You're really important to me, she added, barely able to speak. And you are to me, he said, not letting go of her hand. That evening was a turning point for Dakota. She realized that her fears had gradually led to a new confidence. Thomas was not only handsome and caring, he was someone who saw her for who she was and accepted her decisively. There were still difficulties and conversations ahead, but they both knew that something had been born between them that could no longer be denied. Dakota and Thomas returned to the city after a busy weekend in the winter house. Their bond had strengthened, but there were unresolved issues that required courage and frankness with the British side. The last evening before Christmas was especially necessary for Dakota. Thomas invited her to a festive dinner in a cozy restaurant, where garlands of lights twinkled and the melodies of Christmas carols. You look beautiful, Thomas said when she walked in. Her simple emerald dress emphasized her natural beauty. Thank you, she replied with a slight blush. Thomas was unusually quiet at dinner. Dakota sensed that he wanted to say something, but was hesitant. She spoke up, too, whether she should make the first move or not. Finally, Thomas broke the silence. Dakota, I've been thinking about this since the moment we met. You changed me. I was built for work, to avoid any restrictions, but with you, it's different. Her heart sank. You're not just my girlfriend who came into my life. You've become a part of it, an important part. Thomas, she began, but he interrupted her, reaching out and taking her hand. I know this is the foundation for you. You're afraid that you'll be alone again. But I want you to know that I won't let that happen. I want to be with you. Dakota felt tears in her eyes. Do you really think so? She asked, her voice shaking. Absolutely, the look, he answered, his with sincerity. After dinner, Thomas drove her home. Under the Christmas lights at the entrance to her house, he stopped, looked at her, and said, I have a favor to ask of you. What? She was surprised. Stay in my life, he said quietly. It doesn't matter what it will look like. Just stay. Dakota felt the warmth spreading through her body. She realized that she didn't want to hide from her feelings anymore. I will stay, she whispered, not taking her eyes off his. He leaned in, and at first their lips formed a gentle but passionate kiss. They spent Christmas together, surrounded by friends and loved ones. Thomas introduced his family as that lowly one, and for the first time, Dakota felt like she was part of something real. Finally, there was a person in her life who not only understood this, but also inspired her to be herself. Thomas had changed too. He was no longer a lonely man involved in work. Together they had begun a new chapter, full of love, trust, and warmth. And when the clock struck midnight New Year, Thomas whispered to her, Happy New Beginning, Dakota. She smiled, feeling that for the first time in her life her heart was completely happy.